Hello, and welcome to the Geopolitics Explained podcast. Today, we're going to remain in the Middle East, but we're going to divert away from the conflict in Iran and discuss an issue that is quite under-discussed in mainstream media and in geopolitics in general. A few days ago, we saw the news that the United Arab Emirates had decided to leave OPEC and OPEC Plus, effective from the 1st of May. The decline in relations between the Saudis and the Emiratis has been unfolding for months, and that remains an under-discussed topic. And so today, I'm going to explore the history between these two nations before delving into the recent events that we've seen unfold in Yemen between the two nations. What changes have occurred recently? Why have these changes occurred? And what does this mean for the future of relations between these two nations and the wider Middle East? It's these questions that we'll answer today. We'll start by discussing the history of the UAE from around the 16th century. During this time, the UAE was a part of the Portuguese Empire. This was because the Portuguese Empire was hoping to expand trade into the Indian Ocean, and so they captured the Strait of Hormuz in 1515. Control of this choke point gave Portugal levels of control over the wider region. Over the next century, the Safavid Empire, coming out of Persia, opposed Portuguese control of the Strait of Hormuz, but they lacked the naval strength to remove the Portuguese. Under Abbas I of Persia, tensions intensified as he aimed to reassert control over Hormuz and reduce foreign influence. The Safavids were seeking allies to challenge Portugal in the early 17th century. This saw the English East India Company become active in the region for commercial reasons. They formed a strategic partnership with Abbas I, providing the Safavids with naval support in return for trading privileges. In 1622, a joint force of Safavid and English naval forces attacked and captured Hormuz. This saw the Portuguese expelled, but it marked the beginning of the British rise in the region. For over a century after this, the British maintained their presence to protect shipping between India and the Gulf. At the same time, coastal tribes such as the Al-Qasimi developed strong naval capabilities. By the late 18th century, the British labelled many of these groups, including Al-Qasimi, as pirates. This was due to the British clashing with these emerging naval powers in the region when it came to trade competition. This culminated in military campaigns, including the 1819 British expedition against Ras Al Khaimah. This led to the General Maritime Treaty of 1820, which formalised British dominance in the region. As a part of the treaty, the British positioned itself as a guarantor of Gulf maritime security. The British were also responsible for defence in the region that then became known as the Trucial States. And the main goal for the British in the region was protecting trade between the Gulf and India. The British did this through indirect rule and treaties, with local rulers maintaining internal control. By the 1900s, the British were beginning their imperial decline. World War I, World War II, and the discovery of Middle Eastern oil boosted the importance of the Middle East as a geopolitical region. By the 1960s, the British were reconsidering their global role. This led to the British announcement in 1968 that it would withdraw from the region by 1971. This then led to the formation of the United Arab Emirates in 1971. The initial formation of the UAE was supported by Saudi Arabia, which viewed this new federation as a stabilising force in the Gulf. Both states also shared strong ties to Western powers and were concerned about other regional threats. This worry especially intensified after the Iranian Revolution in 1979. Both countries then became key members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, which was founded in 1981, and they also both supported the US-led coalition against Iraq during the Gulf War. During the early 2000s, relations between the two nations deepened, and this continued into the 2010s, when both nations cooperated on their joint military intervention in Yemen, which started in 2015. However, this is where the cracks started to form. To explain how these cracks formed and how they are widening today, I will ask what happened in Yemen, and why has this seen the Saudis and the Emiratis drift apart. The current situation on the ground in Yemen highlights a fragmented nation. If you head over to Substack to the post that is supporting this episode, it is called The History of Relations Between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. You will see a map included in that Substack post, which better represents how fragmented Yemen is as a nation. There is one region in Yemen which is controlled by the Republic of Yemen. This is the Presidential Leadership Council, which is the recognised government of Yemen by the United Nations. There is a small area on the coast near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is controlled by the Yemeni National Resistance. This is a group that is aligned with the government. There is then another territory that is controlled by the Houthi rebels, and another small area that is controlled by Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. So, how do we find ourselves in the situation today, where Yemen is this fragmented? Well, this conflict started back in 2014, when Rashad al-Alimi and the Presidential Leadership Council clashed with Mahdi al-Mashat and the Supreme Political Council. Today, the Presidential Leadership Council is still chaired by Rashad al-Alimi and Mahdi al-Mashat of the Supreme Political Council, but today, this is the executive body of the Houthi rebels. The Houthis initially expanded out of Sana'a towards the south, before the Saudis then launched military operations against them. The moves from the Houthis saw them control all of the former North Yemen, apart from the eastern regions of the Marib Governorate. In 2017, the Southern Transitional Council was formed. This was a Yemeni separatist organisation that held territory in southern Yemen until January 2026. This group called for the secession of this territory of the proposed State of South Arabia, which would align with the territory of the former South Yemen. The Southern Transitional Council was backed by the United Arab Emirates. Tensions sparked here back in December 2025, when the Southern Transitional Council seized two oil provinces of Hadramaut and Al-Mara, both of which border Saudi Arabia. The Saudis described this move as a red line for its national security. It was clear that the STC sought to control all of the former territory of South Yemen, and with their moves, the STC controlled all 8 governorates that once formed South Yemen. The President Leadership Council then withdrew towards Marib province. Even in Aden, which is Yemen's interim capital, the PLC chairman Rashad al-Alimi departed the city, and the STC assumed full control of the presidential palace. A few days after this, Saudi and Sudanese troops that were stationed there quietly withdrew. A Saudi military delegation then visited Aden and met with the STC leader, Idarus al-Zubaydi. They urged the STC to withdraw from Hadramaut and Al-Mara, but the request was rejected by the STC. Al-Zubaydi stated that these moves were in an effort to support the future state of South Arabia, so it's clear that the intentions of the STC were secession from Yemen. This is when we saw the Saudis respond and hit STC-affiliated military sites with airstrikes. The PLC then took back control of Hadramaut and Al-Mara, and they also pushed the STC out of Abyan and Shabwa in the days that followed. The PLC and the STC had been allies in the fight against the Houthis, but these clashes saw tensions escalate between the Saudis and the Emiratis. The leader of the STC, Idarus al-Zubaydi, was then declared to have committed treason, and he was dismissed by the Presidential Leadership Council on January 7th. The day after this, he fled to the UAE through Somaliland. And a day after this, a delegation of the STC in Riyadh declared that the group had disbanded. However, an STC official who remained in Yemen rejected this, stating that the delegation in Riyadh was being coerced into making this statement. Still, in the aftermath of this, the United Arab Emirates did withdraw its remaining forces from Yemen. As a result, the status of the STC is effectively collapsed or fragmented. Its leadership is dispersed, and the group is politically weakened. It's clear that the Saudis saw these territorial changes in Yemen on its border as ones that they simply couldn't accept. Otherwise, this would set a precedent. For border security and regional balance, the Saudis had to deter any potential future moves by striking back against the moves the STC made. These events saw tensions spike between Saudi Arabia and the UAE, but we've also recently seen further developments. Beyond Yemen, both nations compete economically and strategically in the Middle East, but we've also recently seen the UAE leave OPEC, a group in which Saudi Arabia is very influential. And so, is this an isolated event, or is this connected to declining relations between Saudi Arabia and the UAE? And if it is in connection to these declining relations, how long will this decline last? In my opinion, the UAE deciding to leave OPEC is huge news that will impact global energy markets and has the potential to affect other nations within OPEC. Will we see tensions emerge among the rest of the OPEC members? And how will tensions between the Saudis and the Emiratis develop as we look forward? It's this that we'll discuss in next episode. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on the podcast platform of your choice. It really helps out the podcast. I've been Dylan, and I'll talk to you next time.